Hello, and welcome to Recapping with Delora
and Ashley.
Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Recapping Podcast.
Also, rate, review, and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the things.
We want to hear your thoughts on the movies and shows we review.
Leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or our YouTube channel, and we will read them during the show.
Or reach out to us on social media. We love talking all things entertainment and pop culture with you.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you.
All right. We are back with another In Conversation.
Ashley, I need someone to pinch me right now because I just cannot believe who we're about to have this wonderful conversation with.
Absolutely. We are bringing on the co-founder and CEO of MoviePass, Stacy Spikes. Stacy, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is such an honor. Thank you.
We appreciate it. As I've mentioned to you, was a MoviePass subscriber, had to find the red card and pull it out to show you today. But I did not realize how much of the actual history of the company I was completely unaware of until the MoviePass Movie Crash documentary came out. And I was like, Oh my gosh. I thought there were two white men who founded this company.
Yes.
I had no idea what the actual history was, what the hurdles were, what had happened. Because again, being a customer, I knew there was an issue that had gone down, just had no idea. So we are so excited to have you here to be able to share your story, your journey, and this second act, as I feel like I'm calling it, of MoviePass.
Yeah, a lot of people had no idea. And I was even doing an interview earlier today, and someone said, "Was that intentional that you didn't let them?" I'm like, "No, we didn't hide it, but we also, it just never came out. We were so focused on the product and just wanted to make a great product." But I love how the doc starts with what you think you knew happened.
Yes,
and it's going down the tracks, and then one of the developers says, it wasn't these guys who started. It was Stacy and Hamay, and then it rewinds back. So I thought that was a really nice touch that they did on the film.
Absolutely. It was so well done.
My favorite part. My mouth was on the floor when I found that. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And me being a bit of a business buff too, just like understanding how fickle the stock market is too. It's just like, man, it was such a compelling documentary, and just so excited to talk more with you now.
Thank you.
All right, so let's launch right in. Please walk us and our listeners through the highlights of your journey as a movie buff, an entrepreneur, to the co-founder and CEO of MoviePass.
Wow. You want me to start like childhood? You want me to go?
Please.
All right. So I always loved going to the movies, and I grew up in Houston, Texas. And my mother would take us on the weekends, my brother and I, Saturday early. She would drop us off, go run her errands, and come back and pick us up. And so we could do one or two movies. And if there were Disney films or whatever, kids films, sometimes we watched the same movie twice. And so that was my early childhood. And then lo and behold, there was this one day, this film came out. I was in high school. I was 10, 11, maybe 12 years old. And it was the first Blade Runner came out. And I had even seen Star Wars before that. And Star Wars was just like this great movie. But when I saw Blade Runner, there was this decision that whatever that world was, I wanted to do that for a living. I wanted to either make films or act in them or something. And after I graduated from high school, I went and moved to Los Angeles. And I got a job actually in the music industry. Berry Gordy had sold Motown to Universal. So I became a product manager, the classic, you worked in the mailroom, you worked your way up. And so kind of started as a gopher in the art department, worked my way up, became a product manager. And a product manager is kind of like a manager. You're the manager of the artist inside the record label. You're their counterpart to their manager on the outside. And so I became a product manager, and one of my first groups was Boys to Men.
Insane.
Yeah, and it's like
No biggie. No big
it's
deal.
it's right place, right time, definitely. And so by the time, so I hadn't gone to college and was kind of lying about my age. And so by the time I was 21, I was product manager to Boyz II Men, Queen Latifah, Eddie Murphy, Stevie Wonder, and doing Spike Lee's soundtracks. And so
Were you, not to interrupt you, were you blown away at this age to have this level of like access in your so early in your career? I mean, these were major talent.
but I didn't see it like that at that time because you when you're that young and you're starting out in a career, you're insecure all the time.
Mm.
Boys to
Yes.
Men wasn't, and then no, it didn't matter whatever you were working on. If you screwed up bad enough, you were going to get fired. And so
Yes.
it was, you don't have they weren't Boys to Men then, right? It wasn't Spike Lee. Remember, there was Spike Lee, there was John Singleton, there were the Hughes brothers. There was a lot of people running around making movies. So we look back in time and we say that, but at the time, no,
Gotcha.
it was, you better
But
not let any of these balls drop because you
Eddie
can.
Murphy, though, Eddie Murphy was on fire during that
Yeah.
time.
But Eddie had joined the label, and the way I ended up being Eddie's product manager was Boyz II Men was on the Boomerang soundtrack with End of the Road. And
Yes.
that was on the soundtrack. And so when he came over to Motown, because he had done that song Party All the Time and
Yes.
that album that was on a different label. When he came over, his people said, we want Boyz II Men's product manager. And that's kind of how that happened. But
Mm.
um,
So looking
yeah,
back now, are you like, ooh, I have a piece of all of that success because I was their product manager in the early days.
yeah, I mean, it was just literally right place, right time. Berry Gordy had to sell Motown right when I was getting out of high school. And he had to plan all that just for me, see? And so
Exactly.
he's like, wait, there's a young man someplace in the universe, and I need to make all these changes just for him. And so I worked there. Then I went to Sony and I did the first soundtrack for Bad Boys. So I did with
Yes.
Bad Boys 1, I had the number one single, the number one music video, the number one soundtrack, and then the number one movie all at the same time.
You were the J-Lo of product
You
managers.
took it right out of my mouth, Ashley. Goodness
And
gracious. I love this so much.
it,
And you're just touching all. So I want to say thank you so much for all the work you've done for the culture. I mean, just this insight alone has been mind blowing, but just thinking about the documentary and you talked about Motown and Miramax and the work you created, the Urban World Film Festival, just to know your fingerprints have been a part of things that we hold so near and dear to our hearts. Like we recap Boomerang, we talked about Bad Boys 4 just because we just love that series. This is just super exciting. Yes, please continue.
yeah. So I went to Sony, and Sony was like, I was a big fish in a small pond at Motown. Then I went to being a little fish in a really big pond with Sony. But again, this is God's favor and moving things around. Mark Gill, who was head of marketing at Columbia, when Columbia TriStar merged, he went to Miramax. So Mark calls me up one day and says, hey, I want you to come over at Miramax. And this is when they were gods. They were King of the Hill. The Disney deal had happened. And so this is after Pulp Fiction. So Mark says, this is going to be a very interesting interview, but just go with it. Just follow me. And so we walked into Harvey's office, and my interview this is my whole interview. Harvey's sitting behind his desk. Bob is sitting on the other side of the desk. And there's three other people. It's a smoke-filled room, size of a shoebox. And I'm standing next to Harvey's desk, and he goes, Stacy, I hear good things about you. I hear that you are very good at what you do. And I said, thank you, Harvey. And he says, we work hard here at Miramax. Do you work hard? Do you like to work hard? And I was like, yes, I'm okay to work hard. And he wipes pizza off the top of a script. He literally takes his hand and wipes it on his shirt and hands me the script for Scream. And he says, I want you to go home and read this, and we want your answer by tomorrow, whether you want to come and be an executive here at Miramax. And so I go home and I'm reading the script where Drew Barrymore's character at the beginning, what happens in Scream.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Yeah, exactly. And so then that's how I got the job at Miramax. And so I did Scream, I did The Crow, I did Train Spotting, so everything that had a soundtrack that was youth, I had. And so, again, just going from place to place. And at that point, Queen Latifah had joined. She had come over to Miramax and was starting to do movies. And one thing led to another. And since I had been Queen Latifah's product manager, I knew her and the flavor unit crew and Shakim. So it was like, wow, you already know all of these people. And it was my people. And so Miramax and Flavor Unit were looking to create an urban division to compete with New Line. And one thing led to another. The deal didn't happen, but we were having all these conversations about how big the Black and Latino audiences were and their combined buying power. And we were doing all this research. And I realized, we didn't have, when you would go to Sundance or you go to any of the other major festivals, you just didn't see us there. And I'm like coming out of the music industry where we ran stuff. And it's like, exactly. So it was this weird world where even when I was doing the soundtracks, I'm like, why isn't there a Black film festival? Or why isn't there us being seen more? So Urban World, I called up Keith and Lynn Quincy, who were at Vibe, and I said, what if we make a Black Can Film Festival together? And they were like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And they had the Vibe Music Seminar. And we said, let's run a test. And so you know what the test was? So we ran a film during the Vibe Music Seminar, and if it was successful, they were going to sponsor Urban World the following year. So the test was we screened Set It Off and
shut it down.
Shut the front door.
So just think of it. It's the Vibe Music Seminar, and I remember the theater is packed. You can't step foot anywhere because so many bodies. You can't even anywhere. And the fire marshal comes in. He goes, you know how many people are supposed to be in here? And I'm like, 300. And he's like, you know how many people are in here? I was like, maybe 5. And he said, I didn't see this. And he walks back out. Because I was like, I think he didn't want to try and shut that theater down. And he's like, I didn't see this. And he walks out and he goes, don't let anything happen. And Set It Off premiered at the Vibe Music Seminar under this Urban World test banner. And then it was huge and people lost their mind with Queen Latifah's final scene and her Impala 6'4", and it was
epic. I'm getting chills thinking about it now.
So Lynn and Keith are like, oh my God, yes, let's do this Urban World thing you want to do. Our opening night was Hoodlum with Bill Duke and Andy Garcia, and our closing night was Soul Food. And Soul Food opened. Chris Rock was there. Whitney Houston was there.
Shut up.
Babyface was there. Like everybody was like, and the line for the theater to get in was down. It was Radio City Music Hall, down and all the way around the block. And Chris Rock comes in and goes, "Yo, I don't have a ticket. Can you let a brother in?" And Chris is on like Saturday Night Live.
What?
Right, right.
And he's like
Wow.
trying to get in, and I don't have a ticket. And we're like, Chris, just go in. Just. And
Exactly.
so that was our first year. And then we premiered How Stella Got Her Groove Back, Waterfall's Fall in Love, Original Kings of Comedy, The Best Man.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
premiered. We still to this day
This is
premiered
my childhood.
more top five films than any North American festival, including Sundance. To this day, we still hold the record for that. And so we just culturally on the map dropped urban cinema in a whole new way. We did Dead Presidents. It was like everything. So then filmmakers started breaking out of the festival. And I always say, Urban World is to the film industry what Showtime at the Apollo was to music. And
Mm.
so all of a sudden, from a cultural perspective, we then moved up to Harlem, and it was amazing. Right in the Magic Johnson Theater was the Apollo Theater sign. Like, you knew that the torch was being handed to a new storytelling medium that was a form of civil rights and was a form of moving the culture forward. And we knew we were standing feet firmly planted. And then Tim Story breaks out of the festival and he goes on to do Fantastic Four. And then Malcolm D. Lee starts to break out of the festival, and Lee Daniels was running around doing hair and makeup, and then Lee directs, Precious,
Right.
and and then these filmmakers start coming back. Our PR rep, she's sitting in the theater next to me one day, and we're premiering Dreamgirls. And it only showed two places, the Cannes Film Festival and us. And she's sitting there and she says, "I think I want to make a movie." And I said, "Well, Ava, you
I knew it.
know,
Yes.
I said, Ava, you got a film festival you can premiere it at." She goes, "I'll start with the short film." And her mother was sitting right next to her. And then Ava did her short 2 years later. And then she turned that into a feature. And then she won Sundance for Best First Time Director and Best Female Director. And the rest is history. And so when Rosario Dawson, Kerry Washington, Jamie Foxx early on when he was leaving comedy but doing, because we premiered Law Abiding Citizen, and so much talent has come out of Urban World. I can't take any credit for it, literally. Like, we just rented a theater and said, "Come on in." So Urban World will be 28 this year. Now, listen, I was only 5 years old when I started it.
Of
Let's get that.
course.
Make sure,
Absolutely.
make sure you get
Absolutely.
that quote proper in there.
Okay.
And
Noted.
it's going to be 28 this year. And the talent that's shaping our world, they're shaping content and what we think of ourselves and how we see ourselves. And so when you see Rosario used to run around the festival with tape on her glasses.
Wow.
Kerry Washington was running around. Remember, 28 years. John Singleton used to every year, we would have some panel. John would just come and grab a chair and go put it up on stage. Like, this is a panel for, cats. Like, why are you? And he would just put his chair up on stage. And so then we were trying to figure out, we premiered Collateral with Tom Cruise. Ava had done the screening. We had taken over the entire MTV channel so that it was Jamie Foxx, Tom Cruise. We took over the whole MTV thing. We did an after party with Dougie Fresh was the DJ on the mic for the party. Tom Cruise is up on a freaking table dancing. It was nuts.
Wow.
It was nuts. And it was like, we can't outdo this. We took over Harlem. We did the biggest premiere in the history of Harlem. There were helicopters. Tom Cruise, we red carpeted the whole street. Tom Cruise took pictures with every single person for 2 hours
Wow.
on an entire city block. He talked to mamas on the phone. He recorded voice messages. Everyone took pictures, everything. hardest working man I'd ever seen. So that's 2004. It's like, we can't top this. There's nowhere to go up from here. What do we do? And so we tried to figure out how we could expand the festival to something that was year round. And so we had enough of a base that what we wanted to do was turn those people into subscribers. And we figured we could put out one movie a month in 5 markets with that audience.
Wow.
And that's how we were going to do it. And then when we were trying to create the technology, like, well, how do I know you're a subscriber, and how am I going to tell you're a subscriber in another market? Without like a to-do list, we were going to make an app. And I was at a party and I was explaining this to the head of Lowe's Cinemas at the time, what we were trying to make. And he goes, "Oh, you're trying to make Netflix for movie theaters?" I went,
Yeah.
"Yes, I am."
Wow.
And yeah, that's what. And then it shifted from, what if we could do it for all movies? And that was the genesis of MoviePass. That's where it was born from. It spun out of the largest Black film festival in the world.
I just have to say, you had me at Whitney Houston. I would have died. Died, literally.
Mega fan over here. That's why I was pointing at Ashley.
Yeah, I would have died.
Yeah.
But as a movie buff, I think all of us who, really love the business and love the content that comes out, we've had this passion since we were kids. So to see this to the point you've gotten it to, like, how does it feel? Like, I know your inner child must be going crazy.
Look, I have the best job in the world, hands down. I don't care if you're president. I don't care if you're a football player. I don't care if you're a baller. I have the best job in the world. I get to go for a living and sit in a room and the lights go down and you have no idea what's going to happen. And you are going to be transported to a world was in the mind of a director or a screenwriter or a story. You don't know what it's going to look like. And you get to do that for a living. And then once I see it, I get to figure out how to reduce all the friction that makes it possible for that creator who fought for 5 or 7 years to make that work, get as many people to see it the way they wanted it to be seen, and do that for a living. It's a really unique space. People are like, "Well, don't you want to be a director?" And I go, "No, I'm really creative, but my creations are," no one thinks about the chair you're sitting in, no one thinks about certain aspects, but they're the structure of your life. And so a lot of people don't think about the last mile, but filmmakers playing a film to an empty theater when they've worked all their life and it's good, or the wrong people were trying to market it and they didn't put it in the right part of town. Let's put the Black film down in Tribeca where no one is, right? And so there's these things that last mile, because there's so much financial pressure, you need an advocate who can pull it all together and help it work. And that's such a cool thing to be able to do. And I get to do that for a living.
Incredible. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I love what I do.
So how exactly did the MoviePass Movie Crash documentary from HBO come about in terms of your involvement? Did you get a phone call? Did they let you know in advance? What was that process like?
So there was an article written by Jason over at Business Insider, and it was called The Rise and Fall of MoviePass. So they licensed Jason's article. Jason calls me up and says, "Hey, there's some producers sniffing around. They want to tell the story." And there were 2 or 3 people who were sniffing around, but they really needed me or Hame or some key figure. They needed the story and they needed a talking head to really pull it together. And I was working on my book, Black Founder, and they were like, "Well, we want to option your story and this story and pull them together." And so they said, "And we think Mark Wahlberg wants to help bring it to HBO and bring it to life." And this is the middle of COVID. And lots of conversations. And so I optioned them my story, and they optioned the Business Insider article. And that was the beginning. And my one deal was I didn't want creative control, but I insisted on having director approval. I felt it was important that this story be in the hands of a Black director. And so I did have that and insisted on that if they wanted my participation.
I think I felt it through the television. That's all I'll say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mutali did such a good job. I think you can end up with, because the first directors they brought to me were all white. And I was like, no, I'm not taking that chance, because you just don't know what you're going to end up, because you can't, I'm not paying for it to get made. So that that was what we ended up doing. So
sounds like a great choice.
Absolutely. In MoviePass, Movie Crash, you mentioned falling in love with movies after seeing Blade Runner. And in our conversation today, what is your favorite movie? And if it's not Blade Runner, what is it and why?
I have a very famous quote I always say when I'm asked this question, and I love repeating it. And the quote goes, "Our people who like movies have a favorite. People who love movies can't possibly." But
that's the story of my life. I'm like, what genre? What
Exactly.
genre?
What genre? What day of the week? What decade? Black and white, silent. It's so deep, because was it Betty Davis who said, "I learned everything I know from the movies," right? And it's like, God, there's people's movie. Here's Keanu Reeves movies. Here's this person's movies. Here's Denzel's movies. Here's like you just, and then there's where you were when you saw them and what you did. And I get these questions about movies, and I wonder, do you go, when they ask, I go, do you go to the movies? Like, so one example is, what's your favorite movie theater? And I said, well, okay, movies and music are very similar. You're not going to go see Taylor Swift at a little jazz club, and you're not going to see Wynton Marsalis at Madison Square Garden. So
true. Ambiance matters.
A 400-seat theater in Dolby Atmos IMAX is Dune. You need to do those things. You cannot do Dune at the Film Forum on something that's 8 rows deep. You can't. Like, you just can't. And so, but if I'm watching a foreign film and I'm reading subtitles, I need that. So it's favorite movie, and even what's your favorite theater, they're like different venues have totally different experiences. If I have a young film I went to see Bad Boys at 8:00 at night, Times Square, right? Because you got to see it with the people.
You really do. Ashley and I just had this conversation, and we had 2 different movie experiences. And I told her I went on Father's Day weekend on a Saturday. I think it was like a 6:00 show. We were hooting, hollering, clapping, crying. It was an experience.
Yeah. All I have to say about Bad Boys, one word. People ask me, what did you think? I say one word, Reggie.
Period.
Shut it down, Reggie.
Period.
Shut it. And I told Delora, it got spoiled just a little bit for me, because on Instagram, before I got a chance to see it, I saw like a meme and somebody said, "Reggie's the man of the house now." And I was like, wait.
Yeah.
What are we saying? What just happened? That Reggie's now the man of the house. And then, shut it down.
Yeah. The hooting and hollering happened when he did his salute at the end to the camera.
Reggie,
we just lost it.
I still have to go see it again just for that scene. Reggie, people lost their minds.
Truly.
It was like, oh my God, what a great scene. It was just, and he's been in every movie, and he hasn't acted in anything else.
So that's the thing. It's like, it's also like the through line of it. If you watched every movie, it just means so much more to you, because you're like, we've watched Reggie grow up, you know?
Yes.
Right. He's like, "Sir, I'm a Marine, sir." He's like, "Well, you need to deploy. You need to get off my couch." But if Reggie wasn't on that couch, he wouldn't have been able to help that day.
Exactly.
And that's the thing about movies. These characters are people in our lives, and we've been rolling with them for 20 something years. Yeah. So, man, when Reggie did his thing, I was like, wow. And the fact that Will and Martin creatively allowed that,
Yes.
to really hand the mantle over and have the strength to help the next generation up, because Reggie does his thing. There was a straight up full blown action star in him.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yeah.
Love it. There was a discussion in the doc of needing a gray man to attract other gray men for capital. As a young, pioneering Black man, how do you maintain your self-confidence? And what would you have done differently?
I mean, we had gotten to the point that we were brushing up against raising capital, and you would see young men much younger than you with a much lighter hue raising much more capital with much greater ease. I'm not saying it was racist. I'm saying
they saw themselves in these young men, these ambitious young men, right?
I'm saying that the decision makers tend to make decisions with familiarity of, well, that could be my nephew.
Yep.
Right.
And there's something in that human condition that is a harder leap for some people to pass over that possible nephew-like reference to someone else who I don't know you, and that was something we were brushing up against. And look, pound for pound, I was at that point in my career, I had grossed more than $3 billion in sales on my properties. I was named Hollywood Reporter 30 under 30. I got a resume that's thick. I should walk in the room and you should be like, he prints money when he does his thing. Give him the money.
Right.
I got it. I got it on paper. Right. And it was that thing where, you nobody calls you anything to your face, but it's like, well, we just couldn't get conviction around your business model. I don't know if this is HBO and I can curse, but it's like, well, that so-and-so doesn't have I'm coming to you saying I can drop the soundtrack. I even have Urban World. I build brands. I am good at what I do. I know youth culture. I can rock this. Give me a little bit of money. And so we got started and we're getting down the track, and it was just raising cap. And Hamay was very successful in his own right. And it was like, you want to call people, be like, yeah, I know what this is. And it was very frustrating. And so our lead investor said, I'm bringing in a different CEO, and he's a much lighter hue, and hopefully he will help unlock some of this capital. Ultimately, that is what happened. But in that process, Hamay and I lost control over the ship, and it got taken over and went off down the street because a very familiar story. When we make something hot, people with money come in and they can take it because you can't get up the ladder higher. And only so many people can approach Michael Jordan and Oprah for money, right? They can't be the VCs of the Black world.
Right.
And so that was what we ran into, and that's what happened.
I appreciate those statistics that were mentioned in the documentary too, about the access, the lack of access, the hurdles that people of color and women go through when trying to get access to funds? Because just watching it, I felt the frustration, right? That you and Hamet had to give up your baby. And I had some beef, honestly, with the original investor. I'm gonna let that go.
We
But
talked about this on the side
yeah,
before you got
I
on here. I
felt
was like,
some type of way. But
where's the backbone?
yeah, but if I felt that frustration, how did you guys really navigate through that? Like, especially for people in the audience who may be going down this entrepreneurial journey, like what type of things did you do to be able to kind of push through these tough times and these challenges you had, especially when it came to protecting your baby?
Do you remember the section about the anger translator?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
It's kind of like you got to play in this space, right? So it's the early days that when we started in the business, there wasn't even a term venture capital. It wasn't a thing. And so there was no playbook. There was no how do you do this? What is a deck? There were these rumors of these pockets, and often they were strategic. You had a lot of Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road. These were things that they were just, I hear there's money in this place called Sand Hill Road. I hear there's money in this place over near MIT. And they were around the universities, and they were people who had gone to these universities and then had kind of stayed nearby and created these things, which were really designed for the alums to come back and recycle that money. But then people like us started hearing about it. And you started ringing the doorbells. And again, they were in Boston, they were in New York, they were in San Francisco, little in LA. And it was really designed for college kids to come back. And then when Zuckerberg drops out and uses that money and then takes off, there was this blueprint of, okay, these 5 campuses are starting to really pump a lot of money into these alums. And they all look like each other, right? So,
right.
So you kind of know, I think it must have been the way it was for a lot of Black athletes who wanted to play baseball when they were kids. I want to go play baseball too. I want to go play football too. But then you see the politics that you can't quite get in, or if you get in, we'll take one of you.
Right.
And so you're realizing that in this stage in the venture capital world, if you're only getting 1 to 3%, when women make up more people than men in this country, if you're getting only 1 to 3%, we're still in the Jackie Robinson era of the business.
With that analogy, you also realize they're not even necessarily the best, right? They're the ones who are able to meet the criteria of like temperament and what have you, who may not even be a threat to the others, right? So that's a wonderful analogy. I was thinking about Reggie Jackson's recent interview. They were like, how great is it to be here? He was like, when I was playing, I couldn't even go through the front door. I had to sleep on my friend's couch. He threatened to burn down the place because he was staying at his friend's apartment.
Yeah.
And they were not ready that day for that man's story.
They were not ready. But they make it seem like society makes it seem like it was so long ago. Ago. No. And it's not.
And it's still happening in the fact that Hamay and I, very, very accomplished founders. You can't raise money. Like, that's bewildering. And the hard part is because your track record is what makes it really confusing. And I was listening to this podcast that is a Black podcast, but they had on this white guy. And this white kid, he's just over 30. And the podcast was about how he's raised over $1 billion for his startups.
Wow.
And this podcast just aired last week. And I was listening to it and I had to actually turn it off when he was like, yeah, I get an idea and I just, I call some friends and I tell them about it. And then I go do some hires and then I put a CEO in it. And then and I came up with this other idea. And I'm listening to his ideas and I'm like, they're just normal, but he's 30 something and he's raised more than $1 billion. And that's some other world stuff that is like, okay, we're playing in a day where when Black and brown people get on the field enough and you see Hamay and I took $10 million and produced a company that was valued at $500 million.
Right.
Pound for pound, we punch way above our weight class because we don't get money. So we have to do stuff with no money.
Mm.
And so if I ever make a lot of money, I would tell you where I'm a bet, because the return on the other kids, they'll go through money knowing uncle will be like, oh, don't worry. Yeah, I crashed and burned my first one. We'll fund the next one. You can't do that in the Black community.
Yeah. Or you have the ones who just commit straight up fraud, like old dude with the fire festival, right? Like,
yeah,
just below their investors' money in totality, and then still try to come out of jail hustling. So,
which is what happened with MoviePass. These guys, they raised $250 million within 2 months after they announced buying MoviePass, and Hamay and I couldn't even break 10 million. $250 million. And neither of them had as successful of a track record as we did.
Yeah, the one guy, not Mitch, but the other guy Mitch brought in
or something.
Yeah,
Ted
Farnsworth.
He's wild.
Right.
He's wild. So let's get into it a little bit about Mitch, because my next question is that in the documentary, you're described by Mitch, former CEO, as not being a constructive member of the team after you express valid concerns over the ability of the company to keep up with the valid key point, in quotes, valid, with the rapid speed of growth. It seemed there was a bit of tension in that relationship and dynamic, to put it nicely. But how did you feel about those comments and really the totality of the documentary when you watched it back?
I mean, I know Mitch didn't like me, but I was okay with that. I don't mind people not liking me. I don't need you to like me. But my data was right. What I was saying was right. I don't care that you don't like that I'm pushing back, because I built the plane. I know you can't bring in $10 a month and allow people to go and spend up to $300. Every single person can literally spend $300 a month. That just won't work. The average ticket is $11.50, and you're only bringing in $10 per person. Like, what is complex about that? And you're saying, I'm going to let you have all the movies you can eat for $10. And the average ticket in New York, so on the coast, the average ticket there is $20.
Right.
I'm going to take half price for one ticket. And then so at one point he says, you don't seem to like what we're doing. I go, no, it's suicide. And I said, he goes, but look how fast we're growing. I said, do you want to grow faster? Make it $5 a month. If growth is all you care about, make it $5 a month, And so, no, he did not like that. But I couldn't stand there and watch the baby burn. It's like that wasn't going to sit there to be liked. Weren't going to put me quietly in a corner. So yeah, fire me, but let me be on record in the board meeting. You need to shut this off. This was a promotional price.
It had to be bittersweet, though, to be right in this case, right? Because once the train was off the tracks and it was out of your control, it's like, I told y'all, and y'all have lost me, my company, and my money.
I think the thing that you kept hoping was, we see it all the time. Netflix increased its prices. Disney Plus increased. What did they do? They got in the water. We're not profitable. They increased their prices. So I thought, even if a third of people quit, make your prices the right price and keep going. And it was such an easy fix. It's something that literally on Friday you can be $10, and when you open up on Monday you can be 25 or 27. And it wasn't a big number, but even if a third of people were like, I'm out of here, it's not $10 anymore, you still would have been fine, but now you would have been profitable. So you just hoped that they woke up and did that, and we all would have been fine. I would have been fine if I got my money off the table and out of the company. I was like, all right, I'll go build something else, but give me my money.
Right.
How else did you feel after you saw it, as you mentioned, premiered at South by Southwest? And did you hop on like a group chat with some of the other former employees and you guys talking a little bit? Like, what was that like once it premiered and it was out there and you got a chance to see it in totality?
You know, a lot of the people in the film, MoviePass is still like a family. So many of us, there's members of the team that got married and have kids, and
Lovely.
everybody, we all still talk. Like Sydney's one of the customer service. She's the woman who's doing customer service. Like I still talk to Sydney, and Sydney was like, she was in college, and in her college program at the end, they had an expo day that you had to build a booth of the company you'd love to work for one day. And her thesis project was MoviePass. She built a booth and she was a MoviePass member, and someone would come by your booth. And so she wanted to intern with us, and she sent us pictures of her little MoviePass booth in college, and she ended up coming and working with us. And so we all still talk, you know, and when I bought it back, people were rooting it on and let me know because I'm coming back when you can hire me. So it wasn't, oh, it's out there and all of a sudden we had been talking. Some people didn't want to go on camera. Some people were like, "Where is the camera? I got stuff I want to say." And so you had that, and you had different reactions about it. And then when it dropped, none of us knew what it was going to be. And then we were actually thrilled that they did a very, very good, and they kind of make it funny. It's a really funny
Yes,
documentary.
it is funny. Yes. In the documentary, you mentioned being inspired by founders like Steve Jobs and Michael Dell and their comeback legends to restore their companies. What element of their stories do you relate to the most?
To see Steve Jobs like get fired from Apple when he and Wozniak made it in its garage.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and it was, I felt that story probably was, if we were at my house right now, which I'm not, I'm in my office, you'd see me pull the Steve Jobs book off my shelf. But reading that book when everything was going down for me, it was almost as if I had the Steve Jobs playbook in my head.
Mm,
It was when he got forced out. He was being very vocal on the board. He had a very long vision way of what quality and product needed to look like. You know, people were complaining that we only had 20,000 subscribers. Those 20,000 people would kill you over MoviePass. Like they were so hardcore about what we were making. It's not the quantity, it was the quality of the brand.
yes.
Because if you get the brand right, you know, I want it to be that little restaurant that has the line down around the block. Not I'm the franchise, but I got a whole bunch of franchises and there's empty and there's someone sitting behind the counter going, "Can I help you?" Like,
Right.
no, give me the little shop that's got, and they're like, "Well, they only have 20,000." Those 20,000s were diehards. They loved us. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the thing that was more important because I've built brands. I know you got to make sure. Steve Jobs said, "We want to be the creatives," because they were going up against IBM. And in the companies, you had the bookkeepers and accountants. And then you started to have the creatives who could make presentations and keynotes and materials and PowerPoints. And those were the ones who showed up and started moving up the career ladder. So they focused on beautiful hardware, Japanese minimalism, and software that allowed you to do creative things that no one, because Steve was studying calligraphy.
Right.
He
Exactly.
cared about fonts when Microsoft had like 5 fonts and they gave you like 120 fonts. Why did they have fonts? Steve Jobs cared about that. And that was the thing. I always wanted that. So when I was getting fired, I kind of was okay with it because I knew what I was standing for mattered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so as it was going down, it was like that badge of honor. He then in his part-time went made a whole nother company and built Pixar. He changed the movie industry in his downtime. Well, I went and made pre-show. We built the first biometrically confirmed human attention exchange platform that lets you monetize human attention and turn it into digital currency. I made that in between after I left MoviePass because I realized when I got fired, the first thing I did was I went and read the book of Job, which I had read before,
Mm.
but I went
Yes.
home and I went and I sat on the water because we're in the West Village. And I went and sat on the water. So in a lot of Black families, we have the family Bible, right?
Yes.
Quite often, the oldest or whoever felt like they were responsible would take that Bible forward. And often in the back, it was everybody who was born. And that's
Yes.
how in Black families, we had the Bible. Well, I had the family Bible. And I took that Bible and I went and sat over near the water and I reread the book of Job. And I thought about this cosmic chess match happening between heaven and God and the angels, the people that are for you, and the devil and hell and the people that want what you have, that are
Mm.
against you. And I believed I had to be steadfast in my fortitude because in the same way Job was being challenged, so was I. And once I got it in a certain context, I have Steve Jobs on one side and I have Job on the other. I kind of felt an emotional pathway. And that to me was my strength and fortitude to be able to walk through this.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So, what has the response? I mean, I know I reached out to you, but what has the response to your story and the documentary been like for you? Are you going through a series of press rounds right now? Like, how'd your family react? All the things.
I mean, it's been amazing. I've been in the movie industry forever and I've always been behind the scenes. I'm always, on the carpet telling them, do this, do that. Nobody knows who I am. I can walk around urban world sometimes and people don't even know it's me, right? And I was in a Cannes Lion last week and we announced that the new MoviePass Comcast made an investment in us. And I got to tell you, 10 people a day on average would walk up to me, stop me on the street, tell me about the doc, and want to do selfies with me. Like I've never, ever, ever been on that side of things and what it meant for them and what it meant for their life. And they were an entrepreneur and they were struggling. And then when they would say, oh, and I got your book and I read in this chapter, and it meant like them piecing these things together, and you don't realize how your pain becomes something that frees others because they get to say, he's telling my story. And you don't know that that's what you're doing. You're just telling your story, but in some weird way, you're telling their story as well. And I guess, when Steve told his story, he didn't know he was going to be telling, some Black founder like myself, he was going to be telling my story for me.
Absolutely.
So, congratulations on the Comcast deal.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ashley and I were texting each other like, big deal.
Yeah.
Like, we're so excited.
Did you see this before we talked to Stacy?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So coming along, we're getting there.
So you've already spoken about taking a minute, rereading the book of Job, but in the documentary, you also spoke about going to a monastery after you were ousted from the company. Why a monastery, and how else outside of faith did you navigate mentally? And did you battle regrets? Like, was there a period of time where you really had to fight against, I should have done X, Y, and Z differently?
So the monastery came up I'm a voracious reader. I'm always once a week getting through a book, especially with audiobooks.
I'm an
Yeah,
audiobook girly here. I adore it.
hardcore. And
Yeah.
biographies, and I just make up my character. And so I was reading Thomas Merton, Seven Story Mountain. And Thomas Merton was in Columbia University he was a college student in the 20s. World War II breaks out. His brother gets killed in the war, and he just kind of snaps and goes and joins a monastery. And he goes to a Trappist monastery, which is they're monks of a Christian order. And so I'm reading Thomas Merton's book, and the MoviePass, I hadn't gotten fired yet, but the MoviePass stuff they're working on it. And there was an earlier coup attempt a year and a half earlier that Mitch was involved in. And I was reading Thomas Merton's book back then, and he talks about going to this Trappist monastery. And I just did a quick Google search and noticed there was one in New York. So I went and I kind of did a little bit of education, but it's silent. You go, you don't. So the monks stay at the monastery, you stay at a retreat house down the way. When you go, like most Orthodox faiths, they pray 5 times a day. There's no talking. When you go, you do your chants with the monks and you leave, but it's silent in the retreat house. No one gets to talk. I thought I was going to lose my mind being there for 5. No electronics.
Wow.
It is an electronic sabbatical. You cannot speak. You sign up to do chores. You're going to set the table. You can help cook. And even when you're cooking, you have like a little notepad and you write something down, and the other person silence. And they say that there's something in the silence. And I had read, there was a MIT professor, her book was called Alone Together. Skokel, I think is her last name, Mary Skokel or something like that. So I'd read those 2 books very close to each other. So when the monks talked about coming up here, you need to have an electronic sabbatical. And she was talking about getting rid of your electronics. She'd say, like, leave your phone home one day, or whenever you go out with your kids, never have them at the dinner table. So those 2 ideas were coming together. And then about a year later, I got fired. So I'd already been to the monastery once, but I knew I needed to go in to get through this. I needed to go inside. And that was the beginning of that. And the other thing that I did was I started running every day. And I just in May crossed 10 years that I have not missed a single day of running.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Good for you.
Yeah. So
Wow, bravo.
So I run at least a mile every day. And no matter where I am in the world, I only run outside, and I haven't missed rain, sleet, snow, Dubai, New Zealand, London, Florida. It's like wherever in the middle of Florida and the rainstorms is no joke.
Seriously. As we just had an afternoon storm that rolled through. So I feel like you really hit all the buckets, right? The mind, body, spirit combination during this time.
Yeah, you can't mess around. You got to go deep. And those things, reading what other people did, you have this tapestry of stuff, and you go, okay, that monastery thing sounds like a good idea. This Job thing sounds like a good idea, what Steve Jobs dealt with. And they tell you how to get through things. Like Steve Jobs went to Japan and he went and sat with monks. There's that famous photo of him in his house, and there's a lamp and a pillow, and there's nothing in his house, except him. And he's just sitting there. And that monk-like still has great power in it. You need to be quiet to hear. You can't hear God's voice in the noise. You really got it. Why do you think every single time in all of the biblical stories, when it's noisiest around the prophets, they all go out into the wilderness by themselves? Why? That's when you can hear who you are and what you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. every single time they get up, whether it's Isaiah or Moses or Christ or Zechariah, what happens? They all get up and they go and spend time in the quiet. There's something there.
That being still is so essential. And I'm glad that you explained that, because in the back of my mind, I was thinking about the joke. I'm like, that's above my pay grade. You know what I mean? Going to Montessori, I never thought in a million years it was an option. So now I'm curious. I'm putting that on my life's bucket list of like, hey, maybe I should check that out. Because my question I had here was, was attending a silent retreat a staple in your self-care, or was it something necessary during that transfer of power? So it sounds like you've already experienced it before. And would you do it again?
I've gone probably 10 times. So I go every
Wow.
October. Other than COVID, I go every October. I don't miss it. It is, so they give these little talks. So if you ever just look up, the Trappist monasteries are in different places and you can go for free. If you don't have money, you can just go. If you have a little money, it's voluntary donations. And what was beautiful about going, and what, in your question, this month, they give these little talks and it was so Yoda-like, but someone said, why are we here and how can us being in this monastery affect our busy lives in the city? And this monk, he closed his eyes and he puts his hands in the robe and he goes, you must be in the world, but not of the world.
Mm.
Oh, my mind. I think I probably started drooling but when he dropped that, he said, you must be in the world. Yes, you need to go back to New York City, but not of the world, because the world is inside of you. And what we're here doing is we're building a fortress inside of you in that silence, that you understand you have an unmovable force. And that's when you sit there in Maya Angelou's saying, I know why the cage bird sings, suddenly has a new meaning to you, because when you saw what we had to go through as a people, you had to build a fortress from within that could go through slavery, could go through oppression, could go through walking and saying, we shall overcome, could go through horrible situations, could go through busing, right? We have learned to go through things, but it was through our songs and our silence that we learned to do that. And I had to remember who I was and where I came from and where my ancestors got their strength from. It's through story and silence and song, and that you got to go back to the building blocks, that other cultures have their things, but this is my culture. This is what I was made from. And I grew up in Texas and Louisiana and singing in the choir and doing all of that stuff. And so it wasn't foreign. It was going back home, and I needed to go back to the roots in order to fight this fight that I was going to have to walk through. And look at this. Look at being able to get the company back and relaunch it and have its first profitable year in its history of what it went through. I was just being interviewed before you guys. I was on Tavis Smiley's show right before this. It's like, that's that stuff that you tap into. And when you show up, God will show up. But if you don't show up for the party and you don't try, the universe
Absolutely
goes, okay, all right.
Powerful.
Like, let that breathe for a moment. Let it breathe. Because wow. Because what I love so much about what you're saying is, I love that life happened to you, but you knew you weren't alone, and you were able to utilize the tools and the foundation, like the things that you mentioned, the silence, the songs, the quiet, knowing who you belong to, knowing who you are. They're fundamentals for a reason. Those are our fundamentals for a reason. And I feel like, I know personally, as I grew up, you kind of want to throw them away or find something new, or, try to outsmarted, but no, there are some fundamentals
Yeah.
that you will see time and time and time again. And that was just beautiful.
One of the songs that got me through, do you guys know the song Praise is What I Do?
Yes.
Praise
Yes.
is what I do.
Yep.
Wanna get close to you. I lift my
My
hands
hands.
in praise. Praise is who I am. Right? Like
Yes.
that, Mitch and Ted can't get through that wall.
Mm.
Nobody gets through that wall. And so you're a little kid in
Tamar
church.
clap right there. Like,
You're a little kid in church going, what is this? Why am I want to be riding my bike. I want to be playing. I don't understand what you people are doing. You got me. It's 120 degrees in this Houston heat, and you're insisting in God's house I wear a suit, and I'm 5 years old and I don't understand. And then you lose everything. And you hear your grandmother's voice saying, praise is what I do. And you then are like, oh, because see, Job had to still praise God because he lost everything. And the bet was the devil said, I bet I can break him. I bet I can get him to curse you. And God says, give it your best shot because you don't know Job. And I was like, I want to be Job. I want to be that. If I got the company back or whatever, I want that. Let them write the story that he never gave up.
Mm.
Because I wrote in my book about a founder of a company that they took his company. Do you know what he did? He killed himself.
yeah.
He took his
Yeah.
life. He believed that what they took was him. He didn't understand. They didn't touch anything that was you. They took something you made. And what made that, you can make again. You can make whatever you want. Go make something else. And seeing founders, there's a dark side. Founders have a very high suicide rate. We
Yeah.
don't talk about that. So you're going to walk this walk. You will find your faith or your health or your wellness campaign. You will find it. You better, because you're going to need it. And that was the stuff. Yeah. It was like those songs came back and they had a totally different meaning because I had flown high. Here's Boys to Men, and I was this and I was that. This was the first time in my life I lost everything, right? It was all stripped away from me. There was another level and a new devil took it all. And now what are you? Well, I guess I'm that little 5-year-old kid back in church and I understand these songs. And I didn't know adults dealt with this kind of stuff. So anyway, y'all got me going to church up in here.
I mean, that was wisdom. That's so impactful, right? Because again, you've gone through something that I'm sure a lot of people experience on so many different levels, right? And I just think you, especially the mental health aspect, the emotional journey that you had to go through, and the things that you use to kind of cope and fortify yourself and get through, is just so beneficial and impactful for people to hear about. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. Know that is critical to this journey. You need to be exercising, you need to be eating right, and you need some spiritual grounding to something bigger. Attach yourself to the universe, because when the character of man shows up, shows you what it can do in negative ways, like Mother Teresa said, again, another great book. She said, I see Christ in all his infinite disguises trying to convince me he's not really there, but I know he is. And that's so beautiful that you're saying I can see that beauty in all things, even when I'm seeing the worst of mankind.
Absolutely.
Well, back to Hollywood.
Yes. Let's go back down the hill from this mountaintop, back into the trenches.
the altering landscape in Hollywood post-pandemic, I'm thinking the recovering of the strikes and the ever-changing hands of ownership for streaming services. What sets MoviePass apart?
There's never been a company built from the moviegoer's perspective. The companies have always been built from this content creators, the studio perspective, or where you see it, the venue perspective. And so I felt like the third leg of the stool is an impassioned group of moviegoers who want to use their buying power for savings and use their voice for change. And so all we are is a bunch of people who love going to the movies, and we're building softwares and tools and efficiencies and ways to communicate with each other. But you create a very powerful group of people. And one of the things that we want to explore is, what if the MoviePass community starts to finance pictures from a civilian level? What's that idea? So there's these different things that you can do when you're harnessing the power of a community, because I just don't subscribe to the cinema's dead drumbeat. I'm like, no, it's too powerful of a medium, and we like doing things together, and I don't think those two things storytelling and doing things together will never die.
What are your plans for MoviePass moving forward?
So we want to introduce a freemium version that there will be an ad-supported layer that will allow you to go to the movies for free. You will be able to watch long-form branded content. I'll give you an example. Let's say James Bond's coming out, and we all know James Bond has Hugo Boss suits, Aston Martin car, Omega watch, Heineken beer, and whatever else. All of those brands are trying to get in front of the people who want to see the movie, and they put product placement in it. So what if, to a limited number of people, those brands said, hey, spend time with me as a brand, 3 minutes each, answer some questions or give me some feedback, maybe let me complete a poll, and I'll give you this movie ticket for free. Do some sampling, whatever. So Madison Avenue is always trying to be integrated into the cinematic process. It has had a long relationship together. So we want to shorten the distance of those two relationships in order to, use that capital to make movie going completely free. So the technology that we built made it so that you can unhook the branded content watching, because today advertising and television and content is you put it in between what the person's watching, and it's an interruptive process. So what we did was said, unhook the two, let me watch what I want on this branded content, and then I've earned the credits that then lets me go see the movie for free. So that's coming. And then we want to explore ways that the community may fill the void of film finance, again, that access to capital, where diverse filmmakers, women filmmakers start to have access for capital from the community, but gives the community back in participation. So can you imagine like Kevin Hart coming up, or Chris Rock when he's doing stuff, or Denzel, if the Black community had participation, not only helping them get up, but had back in on those films? And so that's a very powerful idea that we want to introduce, with the possibility of using Web3 tools.
Technology driven, for sure. Sounds like the way to go, in my opinion. Very innovative.
Very.
Opportunities.
Yep.
How are you reclaiming the name MoviePass after all the events that led to the bankruptcy?
We did some polling. So when I got the assets back, we did some polling, and we did kind of a listening tour with studios, theaters, and fans. We found that there was enough of a difference that they liked the experience and something went wrong. it was mismanaged, but no one felt that the idea was a bad idea. No one felt that the mission was a bad mission. No one felt that the cause was the wrong cause. And so it got trapped. So we were like, do we change its name because of that? And it seemed like you still had enough goodwill in the brand to not walk away from the name, to own it, keep going, and let that be part of the narrative and story, that you chose not to change it. Now, maybe later down the road, it might grow into something else. And, we've talked about maybe it's called Movie One or something, because now like Apple computers just became Apple, or, you might drop the context and make it more simple and big, but that's something that we've talked about, but not to walk away from the brand.
Your hard work in the beginning paid off.
Yeah. 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 Because people really, it's a noble mission. It's, I've heard it said any app or any company should, what's the term? It should help the inflicted, and I forgot how it did, but it's like inflict the ones who are causing problems and nurture the ones who aren't. But it's all businesses do one of those two things. You either stick it to the man or you bring it to the people. It's, that's what all businesses do.
And the testing you guys did was before you even really got a chance to share this story and this journey you went on, right? So I'm sure it's even more positive reception that's coming out about the brand now that people know that you were behind it and kind of reviving it. Because I know one of the biggest takeaways for me after I watched it was I'm not just wanting to get back invested in MoviePass. I want to invest in you. I want to invest in Stacy, right? Because now I feel like I know Stacy and I've seen this journey you've gone on, and I'm rooting for you, rooting for everybody Black, but rooting for you, Stacy.
Yes. Yes.
Period.
Okay?
Yes. Exactly. All of that.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, that's part of the mission. So, yeah.
All right. We're down to the final question.
Uh-oh.
I know, I don't want you to go. After experiencing the ups and downs of this journey, what advice do you have? I mean, you've given so much wisdom already, but what additional advice do you have for other entrepreneurs hoping to follow this path?
I think it's very important for everyone to understand, if you're going to take such a journey, there's no such thing as failure. It's all learning. And people think if you made a mistake, you lost money, you went bankrupt, that you failed. You didn't. You learned. And the key is get up. And in the front of my book, it says fall down 7 times, stand up 8, Chinese proverb. And that is all there is. It's if you look at the Wright brothers, if you look at Thomas Edison and the light bulb, I think he tried 5,000 light bulbs. The Wright brothers were able to create flight because they were bicycle makers and their parts were so small and cheap that they could constantly test, and that didn't work, and that didn't work, and that didn't work. And it's those cycles that Mother Nature doesn't. If you go look at a pine cone, there's like 100 seeds in there. Mother Nature likes experimentation and abundance and a lot of trial and error. And so you constantly need to be doing that. And I think so many people fall victim to the Instagram version of being an entrepreneur.
Yep.
I snap a photo. I'm going to go to Wix. I'm going to make me a page. I'm going to be riding in this sick whip in about 90 days. And when they tell you need to do 300 podcasts before you start to become popular, nobody wants to hear that.
No.
When I speak at schools, they talk and ask questions as if in 22 months you're going to be retired. Can that happen? Yes. Can you win the lottery? Yes. Can you be struck by lightning? Yes. but it's really unlikely. So brace yourself for a long journey. Do what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. And no matter what, MoviePass not, I'm going to still be doing the same thing I do because I love what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever the name is, whatever the title is, I'm still going to be doing the same thing. And that's the critical point that I would say to anybody is follow your passions, follow your curiosity, and remember there is no such thing as failure. And the other thing, I think the universe says two things. Yes, or not yet. I have something better in store, but you got to walk a little further. And B. Smith, the restaurateur, she passed, but B. Smith, in her great book, she talked about you have to stand on a mountain of no's to reach that yes. And so no isn't no. No is something, is that stone that you're rubbing your blade against, right? And you then, it doesn't quite cut the paper, and you keep going, and they say, well, what about this? Well, what about your financials? Well, what about your market? Well, what about your demographic? Well, do you know? And then you keep sharpening that blade. And then there's that point you come up to that paper and it just slices like butter. So you weren't failing, you were learning, you were honing your blade, you were sharpening your skills. You have to be able to walk in that room when you don't even have enough gas to get home. But you walk in front of those VCs and you pitch like you own the world. And it's a great mistake if they let you walk out of here and not make an offer to you. You got to come like that, because people are investing in you. They talk about the horse or the jockey. The horse is the company, but the jockey is you. And at the end of the day, money follows passion, even if you're absolutely crazy. But that's what I would tell people.
Thank you so much. As usual, I feel like we do these as much for ourselves and to fill ourselves up and to get inspiration as we do for the audience. So thank you for sharing with us all today the incredible journey that you've been on and the possibilities that you're going to go down for MoviePass's second act. I'm super excited to see what you guys do next.
Thank you so much to both of you. This has been really wonderful, and I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And honestly, I can't wait to go back and update my TBR list, including your book. Your book is on order as we speak right now. So thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I can't wait to hear what you thought of it, because there's a whole lot of details in there.
Sounds great. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. Please share this episode with everybody you know. We appreciate it. We'll be back. But in the meantime, as always, be blessed.
Bye.